Hello, and welcome once again to the History of the Blood War series, an extended primer on this conflict for adventurers and storytellers alike. My name is Jian Wuka, and I thank you for joining me. The Blood War between devils and demons is a clash of two totally different ways of being, the rigidity of the devils and the combustibility of the demons. Understanding how each side organizes themselves for war will go a long way to teaching us about their nature. This is the first of two episodes where I'll be giving you an overview of the devil military structure. In this episode, I'll give you a broad explanation of why I believe that the devils would use a structure like this, what its major parts are, and I will give you a sample legion to give a fuller picture of how I view their organization. In the next episode, I'll break down the elements that were introduced here, such as explaining why legions are organized as they are, what the ranking systems are, and how different legions might be composed. The main goal of these episodes is to try and unify the various systems which are presented in Dungeons & Dragons books, the three commands, least, lesser, and greater devils, and so on, and how they can come together in an overarching system. If you're interested in knowing just how the Blood Wars fought, knowing how the sides organize themselves, or not in the case of chaotic demons, these episodes will be a great place for you to start. As a disclaimer, this is mostly a work of speculation, so you won't find this exact formula in any book. The Dungeons & Dragons books that I'm drawing my research from don't have many details about their systems. However, I'm not making things up out of whole cloth. What I'm doing is filling in gaps that have been left by the evidence. Everything in these episodes is based on the books and on real-world examples, especially the Roman Legion and the contemporary United States Army. Rather than giving rules, these episodes are meant to give people a good jumping-off point when trying to tell stories involving devils, both in and out of the Blood War itself. My major sources for this episode and the next are the 2nd edition books Hellbound, The Blood War, and Guide to Hell, the 3rd edition book Fiendish Codex II, Tyrants of the Nine Hells, and the 5th edition book Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. With that all out of the way, let's begin. A common refrain in explanations about devils is that they respect hierarchy above all things. Inferior devils always bow to the power of their betters, and the word of the lords is law. All types of hierarchy involve respect for those higher up the ladder, it's true, but a military structure gives certain advantages for the devils that other kinds of hierarchy don't offer. Though all hierarchies do allow a few people to control many, those such as priesthoods and corporations are generally focused around places. A head priest is in charge of their church, no matter who is employed there. A corporate manager is in charge of their business unit. Military officers, on the other hand, are primarily in charge of people, and that makes them more equipped to move people around. After all, moving soldiers is what militaries are made to do. From the other point of view, a soldier's primary loyalty is to their commanding officer. Being immediately reactive to commands from that officer is one of the most important parts of military discipline. This isn't the case in other hierarchies. Any priest is expected to be first beholden to the divine, and any corporate worker is expected to be interested firstly in the profit of the corporation. That is to say, they should be ready and willing to abandon their direct superior in order to serve a greater purpose. The fact that soldiers are first interested in their relation with their direct superior mirrors the kind of anxiety about hierarchy that the devils are portrayed as having. In addition to these, military structures have proven capable of attacking and dominating others. Coincidentally, this is the major business of devils. All aspects of devil society are steeped in oppression. Even unthreatened cities of the Nine Hells should be considered to be less at peace and more under eternal occupation. Because of this, it makes sense that the military system would extend beyond the Blood War itself. Moreover, having all devils, even those who would be considered inactive or reserve, be formally part of this system means that they can be easily mobilized at any time. Other sorts of hierarchies, such as cultic or aristocratic rankings, can be laid on top of this as well. This has plenty of precedence in our world's history. I'm sure you are aware that there are dozens of different kinds of devils just in official Dungeons & Dragons works, talk less of those who live in other publications or as part of your own adventures. Therefore, I won't be doing an exhaustive list of devils here. I should note, however, that in this episode and the next, I'm primarily using devils found in 2nd, 3rd, and 5th edition books. As for 4th edition work, I've not decided exactly how they fit in, but it's a unique period in a lot of ways, such as being the only cold period in the Blood War. So what I give you here will be pretty representative of most of the history, if not of 4th edition history. The resources give a variety of ways that we can categorize devils. One that seems to persist through all versions is the tiering of least, lesser, greater, and noble devils. The majority of devils fall into the lower 3 groups. Noble devils are very rare and stand above the structure that I'll be discussing in this 2-parter. Least devils include Nuparibos and Spinagons, or spined devils. Lemures are usually said to be lower than least, but they count here for this discussion. Lesser devils include Barbazu, bearded devils, Chitons, chain devils, and Erinyes. Greater devils include Gelugons, ice devils, Amnuzu, Styx devils, and pit fiends. The actual challenge level of each seems to waver between editions, but their overall category usually doesn't. These categories tell us about relative individual power, but they don't tell us much about how the devils are organized. That topic is a bit muddier, but I do believe that a clear solution can be found. Our problem is that 2nd, 3rd, and 5th editions each give different answers about the overarching structure of the Devil military. 2nd edition proposes that the Blood War forces are split into 3 commands, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, each with 3 generals. Standing above these was a cabal called the Dark Eight, 8 pit fiends who were the ultimate strategic command of the military, something like a contemporary defense council or the US Joint Chiefs of Staff. 3rd edition says that each layer of the 9 Hells has its own legion, and that the Archdukes are personally responsible for mobilizing them. And 5th edition says that there are 3 kinds of legions, Dreg, Shield, and Sword, that represent different battlefield roles. So how can these 3 systems be brought together into a single unified structure? Let's go through them one by one. Firstly, for 3rd edition's 9 legions, it doesn't make much sense for each layer to have its own legion for the Blood War. Layer lords are usually depicted as residing within their capitals unless they are compelled to leave, so they wouldn't be going out frequently to wage the war. Also, they see problems on a layer as belonging to that layer's master, so the idea that any such help would be offered is fairly unlikely. However, it does make sense to me that each layer lord would have their own force for defense and control of their own layers. So we'll keep the basic concept of the 9 legions, but rather than making them frontline fighters, they will be the 9 custodial armies and will be based each on their own layer. I feel like I should talk about terms a bit. I know custodial armies is the Warhammer 40,000 term, but custodia is the Latin for guard. As we get into specific terms and ranks, I want to note that I'm going to be leaning heavily on Roman or Latin phrasing for the terms. Also, I will be using the terms Legius and Custodius and similar terms at some points. This is a kind of cod Latin that I'm using because declensions take longer than 2 hours to learn. Back on track, the 5th edition conception does not make it entirely clear how we should think of the division between Dreg, Shield, and Sword legions. I think they should be understood not as branches, such as the US's Army, Navy, etc., but as unit types like infantry, cavalry, or artillery. They don't exactly match up to our contemporary unit types, and I'll talk more about this in part 2, but I'm going to move forward with this assumption. That leaves the 2nd edition system of 3 commands, and in truth, it is the best choice to use in organizing a mass military. Each of the 3 commands can be considered to be its own branch, with the 3rd command as the Army, the 2nd command as the Navy, and the 1st command as a kind of special forces branch like the US Marine Corps or an expanded and independent Army Rangers. The vast majority of devils, even those who are inactive or on layers that are rarely touched by the Blood War, are part of this 3 command system. The only exceptions are those who are part of the custodial armies. Since legions is usually what devil forces are called, we'll assume that the legion is the basic unit of their military. That is to say, it's the smallest unit which has its own commander and complementary subunits, and which can fight competently on its own. For those who are familiar with our world military organization, we have two common systems: the regimental system, which has the regiment as its basic unit, and the continental or divisional system, which has the larger division as its base unit. However, it has to be pointed out that devil armies are an order of magnitude larger than armies of our own world in the present day. A devil legion is roughly the size of a US Army division, at least 4 times the size of a Roman legion. Roman legions were about 5,000 strong at full strength, which puts the devil legions at a minimum of 20,000 soldiers. The difference in size is even greater than that, though. According to Wikipedia, the US Army currently has 7 field armies, 8 to 12 divisions each, plus 11 independent divisions, which puts them at roughly 60 to 90 divisions total. Now, I'm sure I got some or all of that wrong, but it will be close enough to illustrate my point, because while the US Army might even field 100 divisions at maximum, a single devil general will command 150 devil legions at the bare minimum. That is multiplied by 9, since each of the 3 commands has 3 generals, and doesn't even include the 9 custodial armies or the millions of Abishai auxiliaries. Numbers of this scale portray the endlessness of the infernal legions. A strike into Beator has never been enough to even dent the armies of hell. It's only numbers like this that allow the devils to stand against the demons, who are, if anything, more numerous. But most won't ever have to deal with the armies on a scale like this, so I'll bring our focus back down to a single legion of devils. This legion that I'll lay out is just an example to help you understand how a legion would be put together. It will have a lot of elements that I'm not going to fully explain right now. If you're familiar with wargaming in any context, military history, or if you've worked any job that has assistant managers, district managers, and so on, you should be able to follow along. Our example legion will be part of the 3rd Command. This legion would be proudly referred to as a Dreg Legion, but that doesn't mean it has only the worst units making it up. In fact, despite this legion being of the lowest type in the lowest command, we'll give them a good reason to have more than the bottom of the barrel: a famous leader. The general with ultimate authority over this legion will be none other than Bel, perpetrator of the Four Cross and once Lord of Avernus. Note that this is B-E-L, not the same as the B-A-E-L who is found in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. As a powerful pit fiend who undoubtedly has favors to call in, Bel of the Four Cross would be able to outfit his troops a little better than his peers. This legion will be one of those meant to give more trouble than the usual demon fodder. Generals among devils control 1 army each, so Bel is in command of the army of Bel. Below General Bel are several governors, most of them Amnesu and each in control of a province. Province is just a formation term, it's not generally tied to an actual place. Usually, Amnesu would be above placement in the 3rd Command, but Bel's influence prevails. Below the governors are commanders, each in charge of a division composed of several legions. Our legion's commanding officer will be a Gelugon holding the rank of Legate. The legion's full designation will be Legius 14 Antius Bel, being in the Antius province of Bel's army. As many devil legions have nicknames, as attested in Mordenkainen's and in the 3rd edition Monster Manual, our legion will be called the Crooked Horns Legion. Many legions are also aided by auxiliary units of Abishai. They are never grouped larger than the cohort level, and their leaders are always subservient to the legion legate, but they often number as much as their mainline counterparts. Despite this, they always have to be considered as on loan from Tiamat, who they view as their true master. If Tiamat was ever to go to war against the Archdevils, the Abishai would certainly defect to her side. I'll sketch out the Abishai contingent later, but it's important that you know that they're there. Of the Legion itself, the Legate keeps control of the Legion through their control over leaders of cohorts, but they do have their own personal attendants as well. The Legate's scribes are 10 Spinagons, their leader being a Brachina, or Pleasure Devil, who holds the rank of Champion. Champion is a special rank, separate from the regular ranks and established to allow specialist units to keep advancing without expecting to command others. If the Brachna was their equivalent regular rank, that is to say, a vice prefect, they could expect to command at least a cohort of 1,000 instead of 10 pathetic scribes. The legate also has a bodyguard of 100 homunculus, or barbed devils, each typically holding the special rank of factotum. The major subunits of a legion are the cohorts, typically of 1,000 soldiers as said before, and each cohort falling into a type, such as dreg, shield, or sword. Cohorts are made up of bands which are about 200 each, and each band is made up of 10 sets of 20 soldiers. A cohort is usually led by a prefect, a band by a centurion, and a set by someone holding the rank of leader, or set leader. Legions usually have 20 cohorts in total, but this changes for dreg legions that are fielding true dreg units, lemures and nuparibos. Such quote-unquote soldiers are almost entirely mindless, which means that they have to be driven into battle. However, they do respond to telepathic commands as well as to force. For this reason, it makes sense that the dreg cohorts would have more than the normal strength in soldiers, but there would be fewer cohorts. This means that true dreg legions can end up fielding 16 cohorts in total, 4 sword cohorts, 4 shield cohorts, and 8 double-strength dreg cohorts. For those who have done the math, that means that despite fielding fewer cohorts, a dreg legion will field almost 1.5 times the soldiers of a typical legion in raw numbers. Lemures and nuparibos don't really have ranks, but they are counted as something like thralls when totaling up troop numbers. Thralls could also include bezakiras, also called hellcats, or the mysterious zerfilstics, so long as they're being counted as part of a legion's strength. Each dreg set in the Crooked Horns Legion would be controlled by 2 oceloths, or bone devils, one ranked as leader and the other being a veteran, responsible for driving the 40 or so thralls into battle. The cohort as a whole would be led by an oceloth as well, but rather than holding the usual prefect rank, they would be a vice prefect, fitting the lower dignity of a dreg officer. Like the legate, each cohort leader also has a homuncula bodyguard, but this is based on the actual rank of an officer. So, while most cohort controllers would have 10 bodyguards, the dregs would only get 5. Oceloths will appear quite frequently in the role of junior officers, not only in the 3rd command but also in the 2nd. They're known as the Disciplinarians of the Devils, and there is no position better suited for enforcing discipline than that of junior officer. As long as the Devils in a particular subunit would take orders from an oceloth, it is very likely that an oceloth will be in charge regardless of the subunit's composition. Also, you'll notice that the only type of subunit that has any mixing between devil species is the dreg cohort and band I just laid out. This is because each devil species has their own very distinct abilities. Spinagons can shoot spines, Barbazu can grapple with their beards, etc., which tend to be most useful when used en masse. At the band and set level, subunits tend to be homogeneous outside their leadership. After the 8 dreg cohorts, we have the 4 shield cohorts, these each led by a Narzugan, or Hell Knight, of prefect rank. These cohorts are made up of 2 Barbazu bands, 2 Maragon bands, and 1 Baroza band. Each band is led by an Oceloth Centurion. Then come the 4 sword cohorts. These are led by Malabranches, also of prefect rank. Because sword cohorts are considered to be the most elite of the major unit types, their band leaders are elevated from Centurion to Vice Prefect. There are 4 Narzugan bands and 1 Malabranch bands, and unlike the lower units, their unit leaders are of the same species as their unit. Next come 2 cohorts which are out of the norm and can be seen as a benefit of Bel's fame, the Machine Cohorts. Rather than being huge blocks of warring flesh, the Machine Cohorts field apocalyptic hellfire engines to dominate the battlefield. Each Machine Cohort is made up of 5 subunits called Engine Forces, each force having 5 sets. Each set in these cohorts is made up of an escort of Barbazu, an Oceloth as set leader, and the massive Hellfire engine itself. Each of these engine forces is led by an Oceloth at the rank of Centurion, and it's important to note that As a piece of artillery, the massive Hellfire engines are usually counted at about 40 to 50 soldiers worth. Each of these engine forces is led by an Oculus at the rank of Centurion. The single repair force of the cohort is also led by an Oculus Centurion, their subordinates being a fleet of imps who are responsible for patching up the engines mid-battle. Each cohort is headed by an Oculus holding the rank of Vice Prefect, since it's seen as not requiring much skill to command such a unit. Legions also have a variety of support units which provide services for the Legion as a whole. Support units use special ranks almost entirely. The Crooked Horns Legion will have 4 support units: a recon force of 1,000, mostly of Spinagons and led by an Orthon who holds the special rank of First Factor, an interrogation section of 6 Excruciarchs, or Pain Devils, a messenger force of 100, mostly imps but under a Falxagon or Harvester Devil, First Factor, and an assembly force of 1,000, mostly Spinagons but led by an Excruciarch First Factor. This force is involved in creating new devils to be enrolled in the army, their primary purpose being replacing the many Noparibos which are slaughtered in any battle. Finally, we come to the Abishai Auxiliary. I want to note that the Abishai only really became interesting with 5th edition, so though they do go back to 2nd edition at least, I'm going to be referring to the 5th edition as my main source on the Abishai. Only the 3 lower kinds of Abishai, white, black, and green, regularly serve alongside the Devil Legions as auxiliaries. As said before, though there are 21 Abishai cohorts, there is no Abishai equivalent of the Legion Legate, meaning each cohort's tribune has to answer directly to the Legion Legate for their individual orders. In part to make up for this, each tribune surrounds themselves with a bodyguard of 30 black Abishai, rather than the 10 guards or regular prefects, but less than a third of the Legate's 100. The Abishai which accompany the Crooked Horns Legion would have the following cohorts: 12 attack cohorts, each made up of 5 bands of white Abishai and led by a white Abishai vice captain; 8 flanking cohorts, each made up of 5 bands of black Abishai and led by a black Abishai captain; and 1 arcane cohort, made up of 5 bands of green Abishai and with a green Abishai vice tribune. And that altogether is the Crooked Horns Legion, Legius 14 Antius Bell of the 3rd Command. Many different unit types can be imagined for the Devils. A teleportation unit came to mind, for instance, so don't think of this example as anything rigid or final. This should be a jumping off point for things that you discover. But if you are interested in learning more about the ranks I'm using and the idea behind the Dreg, Shield, and Sword typing in my conception, check in for part 2, which will be very soon. Until then, I've been Jay Wilka, and I want to thank you for listening. Thanks.